Is yours an organisation that is campaigning on a principle that nobody should have any weapons anymore? Or do you accept the probably reality that if Britain said tomorrow it's all going to be ploughshares, that the French would step into the gap, or the Chinese, or some other big power would just fill the hole?
I think we have to remind ourselves that our government itself is a belligerent nation in a war of aggression that had no UN mandate. So the question that sort of supplying other countries that may or may not be using these weapons for repression, our weapons being used by our forces are being used for repression. It's not about defending these shores from an aggressor. This isn't the Second World War. This is about projecting our imperial power abroad.
Well, do you think that's fair, Patrick?
No, I don't think it's fair,
but
I accept it's a sincerely held opinion, but if you actually were an apologist for this government, which I have to say I am not, they would say that the way, that the front line, if you like, in stopping people being bombed in the London Underground is to be able to go over to Afghanistan and take on the terrorists there and then. And I think here is the problem. See, there's one of
the only successful terrorist attack that's been carried out in this country has been by people from Yorkshire.
Yes, but... Yeah, but once again, we come to this point. If I was to say to you, give me a country which you would be happy to send arms to because they're only in the business of self-defence, I think you might raise an eyebrow. And you mentioned Israel a moment or two ago, I think, as an example of a country which is into aggression. There are a lot of people who sincerely believe that Israel is not a country indulging in aggression, that Israel is a country which has neighbours, some of whom have offered to wipe it off the face of the earth. That therefore, when they go on the offensive, they are really
that's not who
themselves.
They were attacking, was it? And what they were attacking was effectively an open prison by the Mediterranean that's incapable of defending itself. You only have to look at the statistics of that conflict and look at how many Palestinians, how many Palestinian civilians were killed, and how many Israelis were killed in that conflict.
You can't take an incident, albeit an appalling, but you can't take an incident in isolation and say, right, that particular incident is an incident of aggression. If you look at Israel's situation in the world, Israel is a country which is hanging on by its fingertips. It has neighbours who would take it out.
It's got the fourth most powerful military in the world. It's a nuclear armed. It's not hanging on by its fingertips.
Well, of course, but you're not surely saying that it should be resorting to its nuclear arms.
We're going to come back to Israel in a little while, inevitably, I think, given the nature of the subject. But I'd like to bring the audience in if I can. And Julia Goroshenko, you've got a point you want to make to the panel.
Is the arms trade crucial for the success of the British economy?
Yeah, I mean, thank you, Julia. Is this more than just sort of, sending the old British Empire thundering around the world again? Is this not real jobs, real economy? I mean, we discovered, over 1 million people rely on the arms trade. If it all closed down tomorrow, and what would these people be doing?
I'm not an economist, and I'm not sure what the impact would be. I think it would, again, I think that the level of our exports are not as huge as that. I mean, overall, I think 2% of the world's GDP is involved in making munitions. That's a huge figure. Within Britain, I think, we've consistently manufactured weapons for our own defence as an island nation. And from the longbow onwards, we've been pretty good at it. And I think that I can't see it being something that we can just suddenly stop, because then we really lay ourselves open to bigger threats, and not just terrorism. Internal threats from IRA have been issues that we've had to deal with as well, and they've all required technological responses from our arms industry.
Yeah, I mean, Simon, it's not just about sort of directors of big fat cat companies, is it? I mean, there's a lot of ordinary working jobs involved in this industry where people just wouldn't have alternatives in this economic climate.
The economic issues are really, really important, I think. I have to say, I don't recognise that figure of 1 million jobs at all. I don't even recognise it's a figure I've heard before and disputed. So I'm not sure where that figure comes from.
I think the figure was 350,000 jobs, but 1 million people rely on it because of household income and attendant jobs.
Okay. I've heard 350,000 jobs indirectly.
So when you close the steel industry down, it's not just the mill that shuts.
Absolutely. Yeah. Though, of course, if you take that too far, you can end up with rather exaggerated figures. I just want to say, I think everybody's job and everybody's livelihood is extremely important. And I would never speak dismissively about anybody's job. What I do think is outrageous is the way that some arms companies and the politicians who support them have played with figures about jobs in order to build up support when they need it. In just 3 years ago, end of 2006, BAE and the Saudi government was lobbying the British government to drop a criminal investigation into BAE's arms deals. And at that time, the arms trade's friends in the media started to quote all sorts of really over-the-top figures about the number of jobs that would be dependent on the latest Saudi deal. there had been a report, which BAE had been part of, which said the deal would create 11,000 jobs across the whole of Europe. Then suddenly, BAE was saying it would be 16,000 jobs in Britain. The Daily Mail turned that into 50,000, while Simon Heffer in the Daily Telegraph turned it round and said 50,000 jobs would be lost if the deal didn't go ahead. So I'm inclined to think there are lies, damn lies, and arms trade employment statistics. But people's jobs are important, and the reality is that the biggest threat we face to our security, the biggest threat the world faces to its security, is the threat of climate chaos. And we are putting far less into jobs, it's skilled, technical, engineering jobs needed to fight climate change, and future generations will look back in horror and say, why did they invest all that money into building arms instead of creating skilled jobs to fight the real security threats that our country and our world are really facing?
Thanks, Sean. Before I come to Patrick, there's a lady in the audience with a hand up. Yes, madam, what do you want to say?
Just a question. You mentioned earlier that a part of the international financial aid is used to buy some arms. And how is it possible? And is there any solution to control this and to avoid this financial aid to be used to buy some arms? Because obviously it is need for some people in Africa, for example. And is there any solution?
I'd like to come back a little bit later, we can, to the international aid dimension of all this, because it's a very important part that you're saying. But now that we just raised the BAE issue, I mean, I think it's an interesting one, Patrick. You were a government minister. In your time, could you imagine the Attorney General stepping in such a political way as happened in this government to stop what was alleged from proper investigation?
Well, the easy thing would say, no, I couldn't imagine our ever doing a thing like that at all. And the honest answer is, yes, I could. Because I think, I don't hold a great brief for Tony Blair's government or Tony Blair himself, but I think it was perfectly permissible to say that their jobs are a dimension. Now, I accept entirely that those of us who can make the case for the arms trade will have figures on the one hand, and those who are completely against will have figures on the other hand. But it is a matter of fact that there will be jobs which will be lost if the arms trade was completely abolished. Having said that, I would accept to the hilt that if the trade were completely immoral per se, then the mere fact that jobs would be lost would not be a justification. But there were other aspects of that as well. And one of the things that the Saudi government, as I understand it, was threatening to do, I mean, quite shamelessly, was to turn around and say that if we didn't stop the investigation, they would also withhold the question of intelligence sharing. And I think it does lead on to another aspect of this as well, that we turn around and we say that the Saudis are acting in a corrupt way because there may well be local commissions payable or whatever the allegation is. Sometimes in foreign countries they do things differently. And it'd be a rather nice idea to think that the Westminster view of what should prevail in business transactions is the right way of doing things. But sometimes, in foreign countries, they don't see it that way. So, yes, I can imagine that even a Conservative government might have intervened in that way, although the fact is that they didn't.
But Britain is signatory to a Council of Europe treaty that says we're not going to allow businessmen to bribe countries for arms deals. I mean, as a government, as a nation, we're signed up to say we won't do it, but we should still do it on the side.
But frankly, what is a bribe on the one hand? What is one man's bribe as another man's local commission? And why is it, why have I got the right as a citizen of the United Kingdom to turn around and say that overseas countries which may do trade in a different way, that they're acting in some way which is immoral? I mean, at the end of the day, government has to, if you like, consider the fact that we live in a fallen world. And the whole business about the Saudi arms contract was a great deal more complicated, frankly, than one might be given to think.
Richard, I'll come to you in a second, but the lady at the back with the hand, I would like to bring it. Yes?
Hi. Do you not think that the arms exhibition that Britain show every year should be banned because it seems to contribute to all these corrupt countries coming in and buying arms? So do you think it should still be shown? Should it be banned?
It's linked in a way because obviously these arms companies are very big, and so they have these big arms fairs. They invite politicians along. They're wined and dined. I mean, they probably get a bit more ministerial hearing than you and your lads.
I suspect so.
Railings, I think.
I mean, certainly, in response to your question, the Dicey Arms Fair, which is organised by the British government and as a result of huge British government subsidy towards the arms trade, where cluster bombs, for example, having been made illegal, were still being exhibited in the centre of London for regimes to peruse and purchase, I would say definitely close that down.